of Iowa, obviously a 42-3 win, stomping by number 2 Michigan against the number 17 Iowa Hawkeyes in the Big Ten Championship game at Lucas Oil Stadium. Cade McNamara, once again, just efficient, threw a pick, but it wasn't really his fault. JJ McCarthy threw a pick, but that was a Hail Mary. So again, and then he only threw him out there because Cade can't throw that far.
That is exactly why I threw him out there. Yes.
That was the funniest thing I laughed at about that game. Donovan Edwards had the best throw of the entire game for the Michigan offense, if that says anything. Just a 75-yard dime to Roman Wilson. And while he was under pressure and got probably a roughing the passer penalty after that, they just didn't feel like calling it. I don't know, just a well-executed game. They controlled the ball on the ground. Blake Corum, again, had a nice breakaway, and he seems to be getting healthy. Hopefully this time again, between this game and Georgia, he should be probably 100%, you would think.
Yeah.
I think he went from 80% against Ohio State to 90% against maybe Iowa, and maybe hopefully.
He looked like he was still limping around a little bit later on in the Iowa game, which, it's fine. They got the big play out of him that they wanted, and then they were
he's got 2.5 weeks to recover, buddy. Take his time.
So he should be good. It was – again, this Michigan realized, and they've realized the same thing I just talked about, though. You get up 2 scores quick on Iowa, the game is almost over already, right? Because you're probably going to be able to put together another drive or two if you're Michigan to go score a touchdown or at least get more points. Iowa, I don't know if they were physically capable of scoring 14 points in that game. Obviously they weren't this game, but even if it was only 14-3 the whole game, I would have still been once they scored on the Edwards double pass, I was they're not going to score.
They're so weak at receiver, and they had Spencer Petras and Padilla were both the quarterbacks in that game, and I know they benched Petras after a bit there, and
he broke his ribs apparently.
Oh, did I actually didn't see? I thought it was just kind of based on performance.
Yeah, they broke his ribs.
Either way, the strength of that game, the Iowa offense has kind of always been Tyler Goodson and Gavin Williams, and and Sam Laporta is a good tight end.
Yep.
But they took care of, for the most part, they took care of Laporta after he beat him up in the first 2 drives.
Yep.
And Charlie Jones, Keegan Johnson, their top 2 wide receivers just didn't do anything. And
Charlie
had him on lockdown.
Broke his separated his shoulder in the game too. So he came out. So they were just depleted, and they're not good anyway.
So when your 2 running backs, the strength of the team are carrying the ball 30 times together and averaging 3.5 yards a carry, it's not going to make for a good game. They just couldn't put anything long term together. I think Alex Padilla's yards per completion was 3.8 yards per completion. So they were just trying to take what they could get and see if they could get anything after the run. And again, Michigan was making their tackles. Defensively, they didn't make any dumb mistakes, and just an incredible game all the way around. And obviously, you wondered at first, it seemed like they were running up the score a little bit, and then they got their 42 for a reason. So
the Tate Mir thing, and then Harbaugh they caught him on the mic hey, we got a chance to maybe try to get this number 1 seed too. Obviously they didn't, but put up the points. Obviously your starters are out. You have backups in there. Your third string running backs in there. Your backup quarterbacks in there. Carter Seltzer's out there catching passes. I don't think
Wagner even got a couple snaps.
Yeah, they're not running. I don't think Iowa ever thought it was running up the score either. I think they weren't throwing the ball, bombs. They were just running the ball for the most part until 3rd down. So it wasn't. I don't think it was anything over the top. And you might as well put as many points on the board at this point. Who cares?
And even the announcers talked about it. I think Ferentz and Harbaugh have a lot of respect for each other.
Yeah.
So I don't think there was any bad blood behind it, especially because they were throwing the ball too with 5.5 minutes left. You can't just expect them to run dive plays every single play for the next 5.5 minutes.
Well, you're not getting meaningful reps for anybody if you're doing that. You know what I mean? So so you got to go out there and play. And Iowa, if you're, I'm sure Ferentz will say the same thing. Well, we should have stopped him then. You know what I mean? That's
Ferentz is old school like that. He probably would say that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's there's nothing wrong with that. It was cool to see a lot of different guys play in the Big Ten Championship game. That's not something you'd really expect. I expected them to win and win pretty handily, but I don't expect 42-3. I thought it was going to be 31-17, 31-14, something. I don't remember what I might have said a score last week on the podcast, but I didn't think it was going to be crazy. Like, and Iowa controlled how the game was being played in the second quarter, and made it to where I was never like watching the game uncomfortable, but it was just like, man, this was dumb. Like, they should be up by way more. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of how I felt the whole time. I'm like,
they just made quick drives back and forth for a little bit there.
And they were playing the field position game, so they just kept pinning, and AJ Henning kept catching punts inside the 10. But that was part of the problem. But
know how I felt about that.
I mean, the one where he caught like at the 10, I was like, all right, that's fine. Like, I'm cool with that, because then you don't want that bouncing to like the 2.
Yeah, and that one might have, if you watch it again, like, they were kind of closing in. But
if your feet are on the 5-yard line, man, just let it bounce.
At that point, what's the difference between the 5 and the 2? Just let it go.
Exactly. So just let it bounce. So that was part of the problem, but I was content to play the field position game and just muck the game up and make it not, because it would have gotten out of hand the way Michigan was playing, because I mean, they were just doing whatever they wanted for a minute there, until the interception, which kind of took the air out of it for a little bit for Michigan. But then I think Michigan kind of decided, okay, if we're pinned deep, I don't think Iowa's going to score even if we don't get a first down and punt it back to them. Like, we're better off just having our defense on the field. So, yeah, I mean, Iowa mucked it up, and then Michigan made a couple adjustments and then just did whatever they wanted in the second half. And it's kind of how a lot of these games this year have gone. Michigan's mostly, other than Michigan State, which obviously they ended up losing, but they were blowing Michigan State out for the most part.
I mean, at halftime, they were up pretty big by 16 points.
30-14 at one point. That's a game that they should have won. And then, Nebraska was close, but Michigan still had control of that game until Nebraska made a little bit of a run. And other than Penn State, which, that was kind of back and forth. That was a close one. They've pretty much.
That's always a tough game anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've pretty much blown everybody else out of the water. I would include Ohio State in that. Ohio State obviously has the offense to keep pace, but like, they physically dominated Ohio State.
For that being an Ohio State-Michigan game, that was a blowout. Yes.
I mean, 15 points is kind of nuts.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as dominant and as consistently dominant of a team in college football this season. I mean, I would say the most consistently dominant team in college football this season. Now, there are certainly more talented teams. I would even say Ohio State is more talented than them, I would say. But Michigan consistently showed up every single week. They had a bad performance in the second half against Michigan State. Fair enough. But they consistently showed up every single week. So that was their argument for me to be number one. But you can't. I'm not surprised it was Alabama. I guess I think there were arguments for both teams. I would say that.
I think Aiden Hutchinson by New Year's Day is going to basically the future. I mean, it's in his future's in his own hands, based on his combine performance. Not to just be bad at combine, because he will play in the playoff. Kayvon Thibodeau basically has already insinuated he will not play in the Oregon's bowl game.
Yep.
So. That's a real good chance for Aiden to kind of separate himself from obviously another impressive edge rusher.
I think I was listening to Joel Klatt, it was like either yesterday or the day before, and he said, because they asked him about those two, Thibodeau and Hutchinson, and he said, while he thinks Thibodeau might still be physically more talented than Hutchinson, and I was like, yeah, I mean, that's probably true.
Yeah.
He goes, it's not that big of a separation, and he's like, and Hutchinson plays so much harder every single play,
and I think he's better against the run.
Yes, he is a better run stopper. So total package, I think Hutchinson is a better prospect. It's just whether you think you can mold Thibodeau into Chase Young or something like that.
Well, actually, I think the ceiling is actually Myles Garrett even for Kayvon Thibodeau.
Yes.
And I think the ceiling for Aiden Hutchinson is still good. He's like a mixture of JJ and TJ Watt.
Yeah, he reminds me a lot of TJ Watt, actually.
Yeah. Like, he's a little bit bigger than TJ.
A little lighter.
Yeah.
TJ's lighter.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of like a in between the two, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. And it's hard to complain with really either, though. I mean, Myles Garrett's obviously elite. But
yeah, but those two guys are elite too. I mean, you can't.
yeah,
really
it's like
healthy. Those two guys are crazy still. You know,
so
and if
it'll be exciting. Obviously, Michigan is the state of the number 2 seed. Alabama jumped to 1, beating Georgia, and who went to 3, and I think that was simply to avoid the rematch. Honestly, you kind of figured that might have been happening. You couldn't. I mean, Alabama lost to Texas A&M, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's a worse loss than Michigan losing.
It is, but they also have probably the best win.
Yeah, they beat Georgia pretty easy.
Yeah. So it's the argument. Okay, do you care more about? And this committee this whole year has shown they care more about the wins. Who have you beat than if you lost a close game to a team you probably shouldn't have lost to. And they've shown that all year. I mean, they showed that just because Michigan State.
Or you almost lost in overtime, like triple overtime to a limping Auburn quarterback.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, they kind of sucks if you're Michigan because had they lost to Auburn, Alabama would have been out.
Yeah,
right, out of it. And then had everything gone the exact same way, they'd probably still have been out of it. If you're being honest, they wouldn't. I don't think they would have put a 2-loss team in. And if they did, they would have put them at 4, more than likely. And Cincinnati would have been above them. So I wouldn't necessarily count Cincinnati out. I don't love them, and I don't love. They could get blown out of the water, but they've got some dudes on that team.
I don't know if it'll be like a 38-0 Michigan State Alabama game.
It won't be that bad. I don't think. I just don't think that's the way the game's going to be played, but it could be. I mean, I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that obviously in the next couple podcast episodes. Looking ahead to the Georgia game on December 31st, 7 p.m. Set your alarms.